Your customer support team is a liability, and the founders who figure this out first are going to eat everyone else's lunch. Every founder I talk to is hemorrhaging money on a patchwork of tools, one for chat, one for tickets, one for voice, one for workflows, none of them talking to each other, and your customers feel every single seam. The play that most founders miss is that support is not a department, it's a data flywheel. When you integrate every touch point into one platform, something wild happens. The AI handling 94% of your inbound questions starts feeding every failure back into the system. Every escalation makes it smarter. Every bad interaction becomes training data. Your support gets better while you sleep, and your human team stops drowning in the level 0 nonsense and starts doing work that actually matters. So don't build one product, build the integration between products that nobody else wants to build. That's where the value lives, not on the nodes, on the edges connecting them. The founders who own the edges own the platform. So where in your business are you paying 5 vendors to do one job? And what would it feel like to own that integration yourself? Welcome to AI for Founders. I'm Ryan Estes. My guest is David Karandish, CEO and founder of Capacity.com. This one's for founders who are done with the tool graveyard and ready to understand how compound startup strategy actually scales. You'll learn how David thinks about AI support as a growth lever, why integration is the product, and how he built a $50 million plus business by solving the problem behind the problem. And the newsletter is at aiforfounders.co. This is where the real stuff lives. Frameworks, case studies, and the AI moves founders are making right now that nobody's talking about publicly yet. Come get smarter every week at aiforfounders.co. And if this hit, go leave us a 5-star review. One sentence from you is worth 1,000 algorithm prayers from me. And if you're ready to get your story on the podcast that actually matter, go to kitcaster.com. Kitcaster is a premier podcast booking agency that places founders on top shows so you can stop pitching into the void and start showing up in the right rooms. They handle everything, so you just show up and be brilliant. Go to kitcaster.com right now. That's Kitcaster by Moburst. All right, David, welcome to the show. Thank you so much for joining me.
Thanks for having me here, Ryan.
You betcha, man. Let's dive right into it. Your company, Capacity, looks extraordinary. Your history as an entrepreneur is, from what I can tell, nearly flawless. You know, maybe we could. I wanted to hear some crash and burns doing research on you. I'm like, God dang, this guy does not lose. But before we get there, you know, let's kind of open with some of the news that's kind of cutting right now, which is the world of Claw. You know, it's what, March 11th, and so we're kind of past the original OpenClaw, explosion, and now all the major models are all kind of grasping at different elements that they can incorporate into their platform. So I'd love to hear your kind of take on this whole kind of OpenClaw agentic kind of explosion over the last couple of weeks.
Yeah, I think in terms of OpenClaw, the thing that they figured out pretty quickly was that being able to have access to the full computer as opposed to being relegated to an app goes a long way. I built my first OpenClaw app a few weeks ago where I am very worried about my wife clicking on a phishing attack link. And so I built a fish fry app where it's a little Chrome plugin. And anytime a link shows up that looks like it's a bad hombre, it'll either filter it out or do a little pop-up or some kind of way to keep that from happening. It's not a full-fledged antivirus, but it's just a very lightweight way of keeping links safe. And the best part was I texted with my OpenClaw bot to go build the entire thing. I didn't write a single line of code, literally just said, hey, here's what I want to build, and it did it. And so I think we are moving toward a phase where this technology was being used to effectively do a slightly better version of an autocomplete to now it's truly taking on autonomous tasks. And I think the thing that I saw the big jump from when OpenClaw launched from what previous folks had done was just the ability to keep grinding it out and not ask you every single prompt. Now, there are people pushing back on OpenClaw using up a gajillion tokens. So I don't know that it's the most efficient platform for building things, but it is very effective.
Yeah, 100%. And that's actually a really cool use case because kind of in the classic McAfee security, a lot of times the malware protection is actually the malware. So
Exactly.
building it, for yourself, you're like, okay, I know I'm definitely not going to hold my own files for ransom. So,
Well, the thing
that
I
seems like,
hated on these antivirus suites that just slow your computer down, they take forever, and like 90% plus of the intrusions come from some bad email that somebody clicks on, and then next thing you know, they got access to your computer. And so I'm like, okay, I could probably reduce the likelihood of getting hacked by 90% if I put this on my family's computers.
yeah. And that's also kind of tapping into some of the fears, maybe kind of what holds me back from really being so gung ho with OpenClaw is that bad actors out there are using it, and to do exactly that, to basically send ransomware or just attacks and hacks across the board, and the ability to spin up users by the tens of thousands, assuming that like your token management doesn't go completely nuts, if the balance sheet still works, that it makes me tiptoe into the arena a little bit,
Yeah, I
However,
think the big thing I've been thinking about is how long till till the model that can run entirely locally on your device is good enough to build whatever you want. So, uh, platforms like OpenClaw do a good job of connecting to multiple models and you kind of pick what you want. But if you're wanting to build something today, most of that's still going to go with a larger foundation model. Pick your favorite.
yeah,
But I do think we are going to enter an era at some point soon where there are models good enough that can run on a souped up MacBook that are just as good at writing software.
uh, and then actually storing it locally too, which is interesting. So it's almost like a reversion back from the big, cloud revolution of whatever 15, 20 years ago, that now you might be able to just like completely self-host, publish, distribute your app from your laptop.
Yeah, it's getting wild. The death of on-premise has been greatly exaggerated as
Yeah.
more and more people are saying, "Hey, we don't want to put stuff in the cloud for this or that." And at the same time, it's like, okay, I could use pick your favorite framework to go build a Microsoft Office or a Google Drive competitor. But I think I heard somebody mention this a few weeks ago. It's like, how many bug tickets do you think have been filed on an app like Microsoft Office historically, or even a newer one, Google Drive or Salesforce? Right? There's probably millions of bugs that have been filed, addressed, tackled, and
Yeah.
so is the juice worth the squeeze for something like that? Probably not. If you had a point solution for doing employee reviews, that might be something where you could code up a 80% as good product in 20% of the time and a fraction of the cost.
This episode is brought to you by a dangerous idea. It's called reading, specifically the AI for Founders newsletter. 47,000 founders strong now, and it's the good stuff. No top 10 AI tools that will change your life written by someone who doesn't ship product. It's just real breakdowns of what's actually working in AI. Who's raised, who failed, who pivoted, and which founders quietly built $1 million in ARR while everyone else was arguing on X. It's written for people building with AI. Every week you get tactical frameworks, unfair advantages, breakdowns of real companies, and the occasional existential question about whether your startup is intelligent or just well-branded. It's free, it's sharp, it might mildly offend your current workflow. Go to aiforfounders.co and subscribe before your competitor does. Because the only thing worse than being replaced by AI is being replaced by a founder who reads. That's the newsletter at aiforfounders.co. Now back to the show. Yeah, I think this is the real frontier here because, for example, I spent a day kind of tinkering around trying to create a Whisper flow for myself. And it was all right. But then I was like, you know what? Whisper flow is free. So what am I doing? But, the idea is, of course, if you have your bot, you're texting with it, and, you're kind of offloading some of the like creative responsibility where it can be watching you 24/7 and say, hey, I notice you make these, 5 tab opens and these entries into this spreadsheet. What if we did XYZ? Because a lot of times, as much as I cherish my creative ideas, like the more I open up and say like, hey, here's what I'm struggling with. What are some options? It gives you some really good options, or at least leads you to a solution you weren't looking for. Which is just, I love the analogy of like being a sculptor. If you're a painter, you start with you have to add everything, but sculpting is pulling stuff off. And AI is really good about just feeding you ideas and iterations until you're like, no, but I like that plus this. And then you start to kind of get somewhere. So it seems like the next step with kind of some of this agentic support is it's recognizing your patterns. It's recognizing what's possible that's probably outside of like what you've even considered.
Yeah, I really like that analogy of the painter versus the sculptor. It's like that favorite quote of mine. It's like perfection is not when there's nothing left to add; it's when there's nothing left to remove.
Yeah.
I think it's very, very similar. I also think most of the work people are doing today, 99%, is still someone has an idea and they're going back to some language model of some sort and saying, hey, go build this for me, go do this, go fix this, go edit this, etc. I think where it's going to start to get really interesting is when the proactivity becomes a much bigger portion of the equation.
Yeah.
So it's not I'm telling it what to do and then it goes and does it. It's coming back to me and say, hey, I took care of this for you.
Yeah.
That's when this is going to enter the next inning.
That's the fun part, where your agent noticed that you have a bit of a temperature about 2 a.m. And so it's gonna push back your meetings 45 minutes and give you a little extra time and some recommendations on some electrolytes.
Exactly.
Then we're getting into the Jetsons terrain, and it's so exciting and fun because it really feels like it's right around the corner if it's not here already. That's the other part is there's always a reaching, right? But when you start to sit down and see what we're doing now, it's pretty extraordinary. I mean, Whisper Flow is a great one. I kind of have a little note to like use it as much as possible. And the difference is really interesting. One, I realized how much I was kind of dependent on typing for my thinking. It slows down your thinking a little bit. You can hold a thread. It's a little bit harder to speak to it. But also my mood during the day, if I'm really dictating and not using the keyboard, my posture is better. I feel more lucid.
Yeah.
It's these subtle shifts that like really is kind of extraordinary.
You're saying we didn't evolve to hunch over at a laptop like a velociraptor all day? That wasn't part of our design plan here.
Yeah, exactly. I had an idea for a product I was kind of working on for a while that was a keyboard that was like a little ball that you would hold in your hands in your lap for, because it's like when you're doing Tai Chi, you're making the Tai Chi energy ball. Like really, that's how we did evolve, right? Is to pick up a big rock and throw it over there on the rabbit or whatever. So like if our interface was all like right here, I guess you can't see it in the
Interesting.
video. I feel like it would be way more ergonomic. So, and we're getting to that point. In the beginning, it was like, oh, this has to be some kind of hardware component. But surely enough, I mean, as soon as like people accept wearing computers on our face, I mean, we're not there yet, that you could easily have some kind of projection that's watching your hands in space in a much more ergonomic kind of place. So, we are moving towards like a beautiful experience, I think, with technology. At least for the sake of this conversation, I love talking about that because there's also the flip side. It's all too slippery to go down the scary stuff, but really kind of envisioning the beauty and kind of the elegance that can evolve from all of this is pretty extraordinary.
Yeah, I mean, I think about it in terms of if you look at the history of computing, right? We started out with physical machines that then got represented in terms of zeros and ones. And it was like, wow, we've got this digital representation of what used to be physical switches. And
Yeah.
then you had assembly language, and it was like, wow, this is a major breakthrough because we're not doing zeros and ones. It's a higher order kind of thing. And then you went to programming languages like C and C++, and it was like, wow, I don't need to know like memory registers for most of this code. It's, you know, then you get in a higher order. You're doing like HTML and JavaScript, and we're building apps and these types of things. And now, I mean, it's getting to the point where people are using natural language to go build what they want, and it's completely abstracted away from the underlying language, even in many cases. And so, what I've seen is that almost every jump in language interface has opened up an order of magnitude number of new people who can build software. And so now going toward a natural language interface, we're at the point where you don't have to know all the ins and outs and intricacies. As long as you can explain your idea credibly and tell it to go build the test cases, which is very important, uh, anyone's going to be able to build software soon.
Yeah. And it democratizes like software in an extraordinary way, which means we get to capitalize on the billion people in India or take wherever that they've got cell phones. I mean, like once we can do everything locally on our Mac Mini, it's only a couple of steps before we can do everything on our phone, you know. And now you have kids that never had access to opportunity that are brilliant, you know, that we can really all kind of capitalize on you know their mental capacity. I mean,
Yeah,
it's pretty extraordinary.
it's wild because you think about there is there's simultaneously more democratization of this technology than anything else we've ever seen. Wasn't like when the Industrial Revolution happened, it was easy to go start a factory if
Yeah,
you were if you didn't have means, right?
exactly.
Now your point, you can pull up an iPhone, open claw with some credits, and you can go build something. And there's also the potential for a lot of wealth concentration in the hands of some of the biggest corporations in the world. So it's going to be really interesting to see what plays out economically. Does the democratization win? Do the large corporations win? Or is it a little bit of both?
Yeah, that's a big question, you know, because you know that we talk about that Gilded Age and all those giants, and those guys are nothing compared to the guys we got now. You know, the amount of wealth that Elon and Bezos and these guys have accumulated is second to none historically. You know, so it does kind of beg the question of like, okay, well, how does that help everybody else? You know, what are we going to do if we're democratizing technology, but the foundation models, there's only 4 or 5 guys that really are, you know, getting the bottom line of all those tokens. How do we kind of affect that change? And I typically don't get into politics or current events, but it's germane to the conversation, which is kind of the wealth tax that's going on in California, where people are starting to propose kind of these one-time wealth taxes. Now, Elon's out there stoking this fire, saying, "Hey, you're planning for the future? Don't. You're investing in your retirement? You don't need to do that." You know, there's plenty for everybody, with the assumption there's going to be some kind of UBI, or there's going to be some kind of wealth disbursement or something, which means somebody's got the money and someone's given the checks. And what I know about people is they're going to be looking over their shoulder at your check and be like, "Why is my check different than your check?" You know, so when you think about the future of all this, particularly, you know, with software, and I have a kind of way to dovetail to capacity because I want to ask you about that too. But what's your take? You know, what's the end game here? 10 years?
Okay, so in no particular order, Elon is obviously welcome to his own opinions, and everybody can have their own opinion on these things. Personally, I wouldn't bank on UBI producing the results that people are talking about just yet. I think there's a lot societally that we have to work through before that becomes a reality. Number one, I will say though, you know, hold any political discussion of this aside. Somebody like a Michael Dell putting together billions of dollars of, you call it UBI light programs. let's see what happens there. Like that's an interesting test case, test pancake to go study uh, and see what happens to that cohort of folks. So I think that's a really interesting experiment. He put his, again, I'm not like the biggest Michael Dell fan or anti Michael Dell. I don't know him. I don't know him personally, but he put his money where his mouth is in terms
Yeah.
of, hey, you want to do UBI? Okay, let's go try. Let's go try it and see. So I'll put that aside. Uh, I would also say politically, there are. I think we want to be a country that rewards people taking risks and building things. I think if we get rid of that, that is going to be a huge dent into one of the core underlying principles of why the United States has over many, many years done very well. So I think if you asked 10 people in the street, most of them don't think you should be punished for being successful. I think the bigger flip side is I don't know how many kids Bezos has. And I know Elon has a lot of them, right?
Yeah.
But if you're at a Musk Jr. or a Bezos Jr. and you didn't build it, I'm not saying you can't leave an inheritance for your kids, but to me, that's what I would be going after is inherited wealth for people who didn't build it. You want to leave billions of dollars to a next generation who didn't earn it, didn't build it. Personally, I think that should be taxed heavier. And then entrepreneurs who take risks and build companies and do things that require uh, a lot of stepping out of their comfort zone. I think they should be taxed lower. And I think, unfortunately, for our political climate, that policy or that concept would not fit well in either party.
Yeah.
My friends on the left would be appalled at the idea that Bezos or Elon Musk's uh, tax rate should be low. And then conversely, my friends on the right would be appalled at the idea that their kids should get a very large inheritance tax if they inherit, tens of millions, hundreds of millions of dollars.
Yeah. Oh, you could see the headlines be like, "Oh, there's gonna be tribe of people looking to assassinate the billionaire guy, so he
Right.
can collect." Yeah. I mean, it is an interesting idea because then you could also borrow against that, but of course, you're like looking at valuation over time. It's hard to consider. And maybe the tough thing is that there's not a lot of conversation around this, largely because everything is so politicized and so polarized that everyone, if somebody has an initiative, they don't like it because it's blue or they don't like it because it's red, and there's so much nuance here,
Yeah.
and
But the
especially
irony
if
is,
like,
though, Ryan, is like taking a pros like I'm saying here. If like I said, if I pulled 100 people on the street and said, hey, we can figure out what the numbers are. But conceptually, people who take risks should have lower tax rates. People who inherit most of their wealth should have pretty high tax rates. What do you say about that? I think we could
that's pretty
probably
good.
70% of people to agree to that, 75% of people to agree to that. And you'd have the rest of your 15 on hard left would say this, and 15 hard right would say no to that. But this is like one of those middle of the ground, or middle of the road proposals that I think most people would be like, yeah, that kind of makes sense.
Yeah.
But we're in a climate where that's difficult to push something like that forward.
Yeah, or even to even talk about it. No one's really talking about it. If the end game is, you ask all the guys, what is it? Well, we'll probably have to have some UBI, but it's like, boy, that event horizon is quickly approaching, and that creates a lot of problems. But there's a lot of nuance within that, So like to your point, you can't de-incentivize people because some of us don't want lopped ears. We want the ears that stick up. We want to stay wild. You know what I mean? Um, but also, maybe that's not the first layer of the conversation. That okay, we're replacing income and jobs with some kind of UBI check. That's probably not the first one, but to your point, like I love those two examples. People that take risks pay lower, people that inherit pay higher. And then, what are some other things that we can agree on? Well, there shouldn't be children that are suffering for lack of health care, or there shouldn't be people that lose their entire life savings because they have to pay it on health expenses, where we do have, Medicare and Medicaid for its downside being so big, it's pretty darn good considering how big it is. So there's ways that like they could capitalize some of this wealth in existing systems. It's not perfect, of course. Doge didn't clean all the houses, but even approaching that feels like divided and like in contentious.
Yeah, I mean, you look at Social Security as another example. I mean, we can argue about what the benefits should be, what ages it should be, but the math is the math. Like
Yeah.
it's not going to last forever with the current population demographic, timeline. So you got to either lower benefits, raise revenue, raise taxes, or raise the age in which the payouts can have. Like it's just the math. We can argue about what the solution should be, but there are people that don't even want to accept the fact that there's a problem.
Yeah. 100%. It'll be interesting. I think that it's a little bit slower when you're getting to the Senate floor, particularly because the folks in the Senate just probably aren't on X every day pulling their hair out about what they can do with OpenClaw. But it'll
So
get there.
this is unsubstantiated, so don't quote me on this. But I had someone tell me that 1/3 of our senators today don't use email. Literally, their staffers will print out the emails for them and hand them to them.
Yeah.
And
A
again, I
third.
have not substantiated that. Don't put that as the headline here. But do you want those people making AI policy? Really? Like, just
Yeah.
think about that for a minute. That just seems. I'm not saying we don't need guardrails and we don't need AI policies. I'm not saying that at all. But the gerontocracy has to go.
Agreed.
Either side.
Or-
I don't care. This is a non-partisan issue. Like, if you're a pilot, you have to retire at a certain age. We shouldn't have people in their 80s staying on and being senators for 50 years. I think that's either party. There's not this, I'm not ageist, like great elder statesman, awesome stateswoman, but there are many things in our system that need to change.
Yeah, no, I couldn't agree more. It's funny too to see like the European parliaments when they're convening, it looks like a frat party and they're all in their nice suits. Everyone's like 20, 30, they're they're younger, so that you can probably the vitality is there. Not that they don't have their own problems, but I totally agree. There it is quite a morass of a situation we have legislatively, particularly when we really need some like pretty sophisticated folks. I think Trump has. Trump is Trump, but he did bring in the second term a lot of like field experts into his cabinet that I thought was like really cool. It seems like kind of the spirit of like the original Constitution, that you have people that have found success or have found network and found influence, and then they dedicate some of their time for public service, and that they're in there 4 years, 6 years, 8 years maybe, but then they're back into the private sector, and it's not kind of like this career politician situation we've got now on both sides, where they really do benefit by being either the incumbent or the opposition, and it just switches roles, but they're always the same people there. It can get a little frustrating, but who knows, man? The everything's changing so fast. How midterms will go and everything else we'll kind of see.
Yeah, I think I've hit my political limit for one friendly podcast here, but I do
Amen.
I do think what's been interesting is um my wife is a physician by background. She's now a practicing therapist, and the vaccine skepticism I think is really dangerous in many ways.
Yeah.
But the food pyramid, man, telling people to eat real food Like forget even healthy food versus unhealthy food. Like even before we get to that, let's start with real food versus not real food. That's a huge win. And so you could go through all these, and you got some policies that have done well, some that haven't. There's a lot of character issues, I think, in the current administration, but I do think there are some wins there as well.
Yeah, 100%. The food pyramid. Remember those commercials for like Frosted Flakes and be like a healthy part of a balanced breakfast, and it shows the biggest feast you've ever seen. It's incredible. Be like, what am I drinking?
For the low
orange
fat,
juice?
the low fat craze, and the Alestra or whatever it was. Anyway,
Totally. Cool, man. I love that rabbit hole, or that was really fun to go down. But I want to talk a little bit about capacity.
yeah,
In particular, I think it plays into what we were talking about, how we're starting to figure out what the new UI of technology and humans is. As it becomes smaller and kind of it gets littler. I was watching Zoolander the other day, and just the favorite joke on there is like how small their phones are. But we're kind of like shrinking again. We got really big, and now it's kind of coming back, and we're trying to rediscover like how we're going to communicate each other with these tools. So I'd love a brief introduction to capacity and kind of what you guys are working on over there.
yeah. So let me start out a little bit of background. So, serial entrepreneur, been in the tech space my whole career, and prior to this, I had started a company called Announce Media, vertical search portfolio websites, and we began by adding Q&A to the individual sites, which led us to go acquire a company called answers.com. We took that private, merged it with the company I started, grew that, got it to a great exit. And then I had this existential crisis of what in the world am I going to do next? So I was reflecting back on that was most of my 20s, basically, running that company. I was reflecting back on my time at answers.com, and I thought about how there was a small segment of questions that were very, very commercial in nature. They were very like transactional, had high value. And there was a whole long tail of like, should I break up with my girlfriend? What's the best animal at the zoo and stuff like that. And so I liked this idea of whatever I was going to do next. I wonder if I could focus on some of these most commercial, most important, high dollar value questions that people have. I also like the software as a service business model. Toward the tail end of my time at that company, we had gotten it to about almost 50-50 between advertising revenue and SaaS revenue. So I like subscription revenue models. And then I also have this passion to see people do their best work. Like, there's a reason people pay you to work. Like it's you're gonna have bad days. Everybody's got days they don't like. But when you see people that are working out of their gifts, out of their talents, out of their longings, out of the things they desire and the things they love, it doesn't feel like work, or it doesn't feel as much like work. And it feels like you're in a flow state, or you're in a good place. And so I had all this kind of bobbing around the back of my head. And then that Christmas time of 2016, the top selling item on Amazon, it wasn't a book, it wasn't a video game, it wasn't a toy. It was Amazon's Alexa. And so that was kind of a watershed moment for me where I was like, okay, the top selling product in the world right now, consumer product, is an AI that's albeit a very rudimentary one at that time. I think this technology is going to have an even bigger impact on the world of work. So we started Capacity in the beginning of 2017. It kind of pulled, it's like that movie Slumdog Millionaire, where the whole game show is the sum of all of his life experiences into one place. When I started it, I pulled from my experience at answers.com, the SaaS background, this desire to see people do their best work, this rise of AI, all of that coming together. And we started the company initially with the idea that you could have an AI internally to help support your team. So think HR, IT, password resets, onboarding questions, all that sort of stuff. And when we got into it, it was one of those things where right idea, but we didn't have the right product market fit initially. And the big thing that we had to pivot on was that mid-market to small companies had this problem, but they didn't have much of a budget. And then mid-market to enterprise companies had the budget, but needed a bunch of enterprise-y things that we didn't have at the time as a small startup. I didn't have SOC 2. I didn't have HIPAA compliance. I didn't have role-based access controls and all the goodies. And so we got those now, and we've built that now. We've got a big portion of that. But the just getting in the game in AI, enterprise AI, allowed us to see that there was a huge need not only to support your team, but also to support your customers. And that started digitally first with chatbots and virtual agents. It's since gone omni-channel. And so if I fast forward to today, Capacity has about 20,000 customers, roughly 450 enterprise, big names for folks like that you'd recognize, like a T-Mobile or a Verizon or a Nike or American Express. And then at the same time, we work with a lot of mom and pops, life coaches and spas and salons and car dealers and folks who might want to automate, one portion of their flow. We're building this company with the idea that automating support is one of the best things you can do, both for the customer experience, but also to free people up, where you can either get people working on higher order tasks or companies can pocket the savings. And that's what we provide back to these companies to go decide.
Incredible. And when you're talking about omni-channel, is this like video chat, voice chat, regular chat, text messaging, like audio calls? What is omni?
Yeah. So you could be on a website chatting with our virtual agent. You could be texting. We've got plugins with WhatsApp. You could be on a call. We can sit in front of your contact center software. We can be plugged into your contact center software like RingCentral or Nice and Contact. We can be on your intranet internally. We can plug into Slack and Teams for your internal side. Really anywhere where you get an email, a ticket, a phone call, an inquiry, we can be there. Yeah. But I'll say, Ryan, one of the things that so I started this in 2017. It's been a great run, had a ton of fun. And I can say we definitely predicted that AI was going to be big. And you got to remember, it's hard to remember now, but in 2016, when we were coming up with the idea, people were like, blockchain is going to dominate, and AR is going to dominate, and VR is going to dominate. AI was maybe fourth on the list of what people were talking about. And I had a strongly held conviction that this technology would be the defining thing, probably until quantum really goes full deployment of quantum, right? Between internet and quantum, AI will be the next big thing. The other thing, though, that I think people get a little tripped up on is that I think about AI, and for the practitioners on this call, I think about AI in terms of two different types of problems you can solve. You've got what I would call salad problems. So I make a great Caesar, I call it a Cyrus salad because my dad's from Iran, but it's a Caesar style salad. It's got anchovies and it's got fresh kale, and I make my own croutons. It's got garlic, all the things. It's so good. It's an amazing if you ever come to St. Louis, Ryan, come to my house. I will make you my Cyrus salad, right? To change your life.
I'm good for that.
Right? It's so good. You could be out of one of the ingredients and it's still going to be pretty good. Maybe with the exception of you can't miss the lettuce, right? But with the exception of the lettuce, you could remove any one ingredient. It's still going to be a really good salad, right? Get 80 or 90% of the benefit. But then there are other problems that are more like what I would call brownie problems. So I've got 4 kids at home, and if they make brownies and they miss one ingredient just slightly, they're not like 80% as good or 90% as good. That entire batch of brownies is in the trash. And so the thing I liked about using AI to automate support is when we were starting out, I felt like this was very much going to be a salad problem, where even if we can't automate all of support, if you can take out half of the calls or 60% of the tickets or 80% of the live chats, you can still deliver a lot of value in the interim as you're working through those last stages. Versus other problems are more brownie problems, where if you don't solve the entire problem, that batch is going to be in the trash.
Love that analogy too. Largely because if you don't, a salad without croutons, it's not as delicious. but you still have the salad. But like to your point, like if you don't have all the ingredients for a brownie, not only is it not as good, but like it's almost not even a brownie anymore. It would be
Exactly.
considered like pudding or something. It like becomes something else. So there's maybe a point where the AI products are also like that because what's beginning as support, online support, which is a little text thing, or it's got video, or it's basically meeting where they are. Like, is it really support or is it something new? And to me, the more sophisticated that these, chat support has gotten, it's fantastic. Because in 2017, it must have been talk about like support tickets. People get really upset because you get in phone trees and you're like, talk to the manager, talk to the manager. But now, and that's credit to you of seeing where the puck was going because, back then it was like, ah, man, Alexa can't do anything for me, or, but now they really can. So when I'm experimenting and I find like a good one, you can test the parameters and it's amazing. You find yourself actually more engaged with chat support. You have all the patience you want. You don't have to have all of the politeness that we have in conversation. Like if I'm drolling on for too long and be like, I better shut up and let this guy get on with his day. But you don't have that. So it almost becomes a new thing where it's like, okay, this is like a portal into the entire knowledge base of the company. Like how complicated can I get the questions? And my favorite question is like, hey, what should I be asking you right now?
Right.
You know what my intentions are. Like, what else? Tell me what I should know.
Well, and Ryan, to jump back into 2017, we were just getting this idea off the ground. Uh, the technology wasn't there yet. It was emerging and it was improving, and there was a lot of good stuff going on. But we recognized pretty early. So, like some stats today. Uh, when we started in 2017, if you asked our AI 100 questions, we would respond to 55 of them, and 10 of those would get thumbed down in the feedback loop. And so my joke was 45% of the time it works every time, sort of thing. But fast forward to now, I mean, our AI is answering between 92 to 94% of the questions you
Yeah.
throw at it. Less than 1% get thumbed down in feedback. And it's improving every single day. And so
Yeah.
what I would say is we recognized early on that the linkage between the virtual agent and the human escalation, this shouldn't be two separate systems. The tight coupling of the virtual agent handling the level 0 support, what used to be level 1, now it's automated, but a clear escalation path and an escalation path to the right human agent at the right time with the right expertise, and critically, being able to use AI to help that agent spend less time. And then critically, making sure that that human agent, what they do, isn't in a silo. That works its way all the way back into the virtual agent. If you can make that happen and close that loop, and this thing's gonna learn really quickly, even beyond improving the underlying model or adding more training data, et cetera.
Incredible. And, starting in 2017, flash forward, what we're 7, 8 years into the company, and you have 20,000 customers. So talk about your approach to go to market and kind of what, accounted for like that rapid growth.
Yeah. So a couple of years ago, I kept hearing some version of the same thing over and over again, which was, David, we are so tired of trying to duct tape together these different solutions. We don't want to go to one vendor for our help desk and a different one for our workflows, and one for our virtual agents, and a totally different one for our call QA, and one for our outbound campaigns, and a completely different one for our translation and support. Like, could you just put all of these things together into one integrated play? Because we as a customer, we don't have a team of integration specialists to go make this happen. So I heard that once, I heard it twice, I heard it about a dozen times. I'm like, okay, I think we need to go double click on this and kind of map this out. So what we did is we mapped out 24 steps of the customer experience journey, starting with the inbound agent deflection, going to the agent assist escalation and cutting down handle time, going to post-interaction workflows, and then finally outbound campaigns. So those are the kind of the four product lines or groupings. And I think at the time we were, I'm going to say maybe in two or three of those areas. And so I went back to my executive team and I'm like, guys, this is the map. I'm so excited. This is what we need to go do. Here's our strategy. And they looked at me like I had three heads. They're like, David, how in the world are we going to pull this off? And then number one. And then number two, is anybody else doing this? Is there anybody else we can draft off of? So on the second part, I came across some of the work from Parker Conrad. Parker's the CEO and co-founder of Zenefits, now CEO and co-founder of Rippling. We're a Rippling customer, happy Rippling customer. He's got this concept he calls compound startup. And the basic idea of a compound startup is that you take what used to be a bunch of disparate point solutions, you put them together, you lower the cost of the SKU, but you maximize the price and the take rate of the bundle. And then crucially, with AI, you become integration as the product. And that becomes the core of what you do. And so he's doing that in the HR space. We looked at that and said, okay, I think we can go do that in the customer support space. I think we can do that in CX space. And so what we yeah, go ahead.
Go over that again. Let me see if I can follow you again. So basically, just explain that to me, I guess.
Yeah, so super high level, there are all these point solutions. In 2026, there's a point solution for everything. Companies are tired of putting them all together themselves. They want to go to fewer vendors that are more integrated, that can do more things. And so this compound startup strategy, you take disparate point solutions, you put them together, the individual SKU, the individual product cost actually goes down. The take rate of the bundle, you have people using more of your products overall. So your margin should actually go up over time. And then crucially, you be integration as the core thing that you do. And what I mean by that is
all the other points together into one unified place.
Yeah. So think of it like this. The difference between a product suite and a platform. In a product suite, you have multiple products, but they're very loosely coupled. Like we were talking about Microsoft Office earlier. If I use Office or I use Google Drive, I might copy a spreadsheet from Excel into PowerPoint or from G Slides into Google Sheets into Google Slides. But they're I would not consider that to be a platform. It's a product suite where there's some light integration. But in a platform, so in a product suite, the value primarily lives on the node of what the individual products do. In a platform, the value primarily lives on the edge that connects these different pieces together. So in our world, if we have a virtual agent that can go handle 90% of your calls, but then it needs to be able to escalate to a support person, that support person should be able to have AI to help them. That might kick off a downstream workflow that happens asynchronously. That workflow might send an outbound message back out to the customer who may come in and leave a survey or a rating and review or some kind of feedback that then triggers some additional loyalty point. Like in that case, the solution or the customer-facing interface, it's not about the node, it's about the intersection of how all these things tie together into one customer experience.
Got it.
And so I know there's a very long-winded answer to your question, but we have been running this compound startup strategy for the customer experience. That has allowed us to grow dramatically. Some of that we've built directly, and we've got great engineers, and we use AI for that. Some of it we've partnered. So like take payments, for example. We have a payments portion of what we do. I didn't have to build a payment processor in 2026. I've got a partnership with Stripe for that. And then some of this, we've gone out and acquired companies that are really good in their respective area. We'll take on all the work of doing the integrating and the duct taping and the Elmer's gluing so our customers don't have to do that. And then we go cross-sell, upsell like crazy back out to our respective markets. So that's been the strategy we're running. From a organic growth perspective, we're roughly 50-50 between, or 50-50, 60-40 between direct outbound sales and then partner-led growth. But the core, at the end of the day, the problem behind the problem, why haven't more companies automated their support? It's because stitching all these things together, even in 2026, if you don't eat and breathe and sleep that, it's very painful. And that's
Yeah.
what we solve. That's the problem behind the problem that we solve and allow our customers to do awesome things.
Incredible. Cool. Totally get it. Yeah, and it makes sense because, there is more and more platforms that everyone's kind of native to. If, the Senate isn't comfortable on emails, so it's like they'll be able to opt easily into text messages if you prefer that. So there is always going to be need to be like a downstream email confirming everything that went out. You're going to need to have certain things in place, but something like capacity, as if it's my kids, I'm sure they would rather have everything in Snapchat, because that's where they are. And so like eventually you'll be able to have service agents everywhere, where you're most comfortable and most native to those platforms.
100%.
Yeah. All right. It's time in the show to go to the quantum round. Are you ready?
Let's do it.
This is the next horizon of interviews. Okay. First things first, when you're talking about the acquisition, when you sold answers.com and you were looking towards the next project, that exit was $900 million. So how long did you take off and why did you decide to jump back into a startup? Why not just boat drinks into the sunset?
A couple things. One, I took 5 months off. I realized I can't just go drink Mai Tais on a beach for very long. It's great for a couple days. Not a great lifestyle. Uh, I played sports in high school. I wasn't a good athlete, but I realize now in retrospect, I, I need to be on a team competing for something. We have a black lab mix, and we had a trainer come in to try to help us because she was a little bit of a mess. We got her, and they're like, Labradors need a job. They need a purpose. They need a reason for. They don't just hang around the house, dogs, right? They need to be doing something. I
And
am
Chase Moss.
exactly. I'm the Labrador of this analogy here. And then I also looked at. I made my long laundry list. Like here's 50 different things I could do, and there were some probably 3 or 4 good ideas in there. Another, I don't know, 6 or so okay ideas, and then 40 terrible ones. But this was the one where I looked at it and I said, if I don't start this company, I'm going to regret it the rest of my life. And I don't want to look back with regret. There's another Bezos interview where he talked about, why he started Amazon. He went through a very similar type of framework. He's like, if e-commerce took off and he didn't start Amazon, he'd regret it the rest of his life because he knew or he thought or he had this just internal belief that this was going to take off. And so very similarly, I mean, I'm not Jeff Bezos, but I looked at this and said, hey, if this AI thing takes off like I think it will, and I didn't start this company, man, I'm going to regret not doing that.
Yeah. So it was in 5 months. That's a good amount of time. That's enough time to really do some soul searching and decide like what do I want to do next. So like almost everybody I talk to, I kind of ask them that question after an acquisition, and it's just boils down to you love the game. You know what I mean? It's like some people get into this.
I do
You
love the
know,
game.
yeah, and it's interesting because I just enjoy talking to you so much. You have a really like pleasant affectation. You
Oh,
seem
thank you.
you seem rested and like healthy. Not that it's not true of everybody, but also like just incredible success. Like it looks like your first year you did 5 million in annual revenue, and like you're up soaring past 50 million now. You know, uh, what keeps you kind of base and calm? I definitely talk to a lot of founders that don't have your Labrador energy.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, the Labrador energy is definitely a superpower for sure. Uh, yeah, I'm a practicing Christian, so I try to take a 24-hour Sabbath from Saturday afternoon to Sunday afternoon and like unplug. You can call me if there's a major fire, but uh, Yeah, I try to have rhythms of rest throughout the week, and I work my tail off.
Yeah.
One thing I learned, and this is something maybe some of your founders who are listening here, my last company, I worked crazy hours, but it was very erratic. In this company, I have a very, very fixed schedule. So I work late every Monday night, every Wednesday night, most Thursday nights, often Saturday mornings. But I do a Tuesday night date night every week with my wife. And it might not be some big thing. It might be we're watching some show and grabbing takeout or something. But we I try to have like fixed time, sacred time where I'm not fully plugged in the rest of the matrix.
Yeah.
And what I found is I do a Thursday morning breakfast. I have 4 kids. I do a rotating Thursday morning breakfast one-on-one with each of my kids. And that was a pretty easy way of adding one-on-one time into a crazy busy schedule when I know dad's working a lot. And so one thing I would recommend to any of the founders on this call is don't give up on having to work hard. Like anything, with everything going on today, you're probably going to have to work harder. But if you can order your time where you have kind of an ideal calendar that you're plugging everything into, as opposed to just reacting to what gets thrown at you,
Yeah.
you can have a lot more consistency, which allows you to run faster and harder for a longer period of time.
Love it. And that's been instrumental for me as well. Like having time blocks for certain tasks so you can kind of prioritize and do deep work. What's hard work for you right now? What's the stuff that's really challenging?
The most challenging part of my world is that running this compound startup strategy, I could go spend the entire next year. I'll take all of our developers and all of our Claude code and everything we're doing and say, just go work on help desk, or just go work on voice virtual agents, or just go work on agentifying our survey. Like I could point at any one area and it would be well spent. The hard part, if you're running this strategy, is you have to be in constant prioritization mode. And you're not prioritizing good versus bad or good versus okay. You're constantly prioritizing good versus great. And that's the hardest thing to do because inherent to the model is you get value with having everything integrated and shared components. But how often do you work on the integration piece versus the individual nodes? That's where I spend a lot of time thinking.
Love it. David, this has been awesome. I kept you a little extra and I don't want to go over time, but if I have 2 minutes, I would love for you to talk about Create a Loop, which is a really cool nonprofit organization that you're on the board of, I believe.
Yeah. So a few years back, we helped start this organization called Create a Loop. We help teach computer science and AI to kids who don't have access to that sort of thing. 90% of our kids are on the school lunch program. We've had about 1,700 kids go through the program. We started out doing after school. We've also done some summer program work. We're now starting to teach teachers how to teach basic CS and basic AI usage into these schools. It's one of the most impactful things I've been a part of.
For people that want to check that out, it looks really, really cool. It's createaloop.org. The website is capacity.com. Definitely check it out. A bunch of great information there. And David, where's the best place for people to connect with you personally?
Just email me, david@capacity.com.
David@capacity.com. Thank you so much. I really appreciate this conversation.
Hey, thanks, Ryan. Take care, man.
You are about to spend anywhere from $100,000 to $300,000 on your kid's college education. And that's not a small bet. And right now, there's a very real chance that they graduate and can't find a job, not because they weren't smart enough, not because they didn't work hard enough, but because the job market changed and nobody told them. Employers are hiring AI native candidates, people who don't just know their field, but know how to work with AI at a professional level. And most colleges are not teaching this, not even close. AINativeStudent.com is the program that fills that gap. It takes high school and college students and teaches them how to actually think and work with AI the way top companies expect on day one, so your investment in their degree actually pays off. You're already paying for tuition, housing, textbooks. This is the one thing that actually makes it all worth it. Go to AInativestudent.com because a diploma is a starting point. Being AI native is what gets them hired. That's AInativestudent.com.